let's say you built like this case study generator from assembly, but can't I go into like Copilot or Claude and ask it to generate a case study for me and I'll just upload it some documents? And I think this is super interesting because there's like a completeness factor to the output these products produce. And Copilot and Claude will, let's say you're an analyst or an associate who's typically tasked with building an artifact like this by hand. And now you have the wherewithal of Copilot and Claude. Absolutely not. If you're using Copilot and Claude, it will help you, but it will take you like 15 to 20% of the way. And you're going to need to spend another 80% on making that presentation real, usable, client shareable. Like it's way far from client shareable. The general platforms, including Copilot, they have a last mile problem, which is they can only get you so far, but there's specialized kind of logic and mechanisms you need to get it to like a client presentable level. And I don't think these core model products will get the last mile. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Artem Koren. I'm a co-founder and chief product officer at Assembly AI. So in 2019, we got together with my co-founder, Gil McClough, and we thought, how useful would it be if technology could understand what people were actually talking about in meetings and then provide some value from that. And that's where the idea for Assembly was born. And so today we're one of the leading products of this domain.
Walk me through the origin story of Assembly.ai and what was the insight that led to, we're going to do this. We're going to make this company.
Sure. So first, there's a company called Assembly AI, and then there's our company, which is Assembly AI, SAMBLY. We're actually related. We partner on a few things, but completely independent evolutions of name, just so happens. So it's a little confusing. So Assembly is like a speech-to-text infrastructure company with a few other offerings, and we are a meeting intelligence company. So just want to get that clear right out of the gate.
Okay.
The origin story, come 2019, my background is in technology and product, but also in management consulting for a good number of years. And my co-founder is the former CEO of UMT Consulting Group, which was a management consulting firm that got acquired by EY. So we're both very heavy in management consulting. And so when we got together in 2019, our background is very informed by the client service process, the client engagement process, the delivery process. And all those are driven by meetings. So a day in the life of a management consultant is a lot of meetings, especially as you get higher up the ladder. You're basically spending your whole day in meetings. And so we realized that, meeting is what drives a lot of progress and a lot of results in companies. And all of that information that goes on inside the meeting basically goes nowhere unless somebody jots something down or takes it forward. So it's a very, very manual and very subjective thing, what comes out of a meeting. And we thought that if we can build technology that could hang out like a fly in the wall with you in your meeting and understood what was happening, it can provide a lot of value just, from the basics, like breaking down, what was agreed and what tests are coming out, but then going forward and actually helping you achieve some of the outcomes that were discussed in the meeting. So that's where the idea was born. We started Assembly AI before AI was cool. So 2019, not too many people were talking about AI. It was a very different AI landscape at that point. It was machine learning and data science. And so at Assembly, we had to invent a lot of the things that we take for granted today. So we had to build a bunch of custom models for detection of different items across meetings, for being able to interrogate meetings in natural language. So all of that we built before GPT was a thing. We also actually had to build our own transcription engine because at the time, the transcription engines, even from behemoths like Google and Amazon and Microsoft, were just not up to par. They were just not as good. And so as good as they needed to be for the quality of results that we needed to achieve. So we had to build that. And we got a very sharp engine that was rivaling the best transcription offerings in the market. but only for the English language at that time. And then we also had to build infrastructure and a whole platform to attend meetings. That was a phenomenal undertaking. But we have our own proprietary platform that basically simulates a user who will join a meeting with you. And that user is simulated for all the meetings that Assembly is present on. So we had to invent a lot of new interesting technologies to get there. Then the end of 2022, early 23 revolution happened with GPT. And we had to step back and rethink the ways in which we approach some of our architecture and technologies and kind of revamp Assembly to take advantage of all the new AI stuff that's coming up. And then as we move forward, so the core offering from Assembly was you get transcripts, meeting notes, tasks, and then typical project things like risks, issues, decisions, and things like that. And that's pretty common across like kind of AI note takers or AI meeting assistants today. But from there, we took it to the next step and we connected it to your workflow applications. So you can send all of these items downstream to your CRMs, to your knowledge management systems, task management systems automatically. And then in the past 18 to 24 months, we took it another step forward and we introduced something that in our product we call Assembly, which is the ability to interrogate your entire meeting library for answers or documents and reports. So today, if you use Assembly, you can do something like, for example, if you're a salesperson, you could go in there and say, take a look at all the meetings I had with the customer, with this particular customer, and create a sales proposal based on all that information. And Assembly will do the research. It will find the meetings. It will figure out what the context is and what should go in the proposal, and will write it for you. So that's kind of one of the powerful examples of what's possible today with our technology.
I'm anchoring on the word interrogate. And what interrogate means, I have this feeling that people aren't getting the most out of AI, like the folks that use AI. And the people that would say, hey, I tried it, it's not that good. They haven't really developed the muscle to interrogate evidence. Ari Zalmanow, who was head at Twilio at one point when I interviewed him, he was probably the most interesting head of research I've ever met. He came from, his background was as a police detective. And so that's what informed his whole like approach to research, is that most researchers, they act PhDs where like you're basically preparing evidence for a peer review process. In the justice system, there's like a division of labor, right? Like the job of a detective is to collect evidence, catalog that evidence, and then provide like a thesis. But one thing that you brought up was interrogate the evidence. Like your job is to interrogate the evidence, really like stress test if the evidence is holding up. Because 50 plus 1% certainty is enough to send someone away for the rest of their life. And like you ideally want to have at least 75% certainty in the justice system. That's like the margin that we give like the justice system outcomes. And can you like walk me through like why you chose the word interrogate instead of ask questions about your transcripts, or just instead asking like, hey, give me my emails. That's not exactly interrogating the meeting notes. What does interrogate mean to you? Why do you choose that word?
That's a good catch. So I think if you say ask questions, you're leaning into the ChatGPT territory, which you can also do in Assembly, which means it's Q&A, right? Question, answer. But interrogate assumes a body of content that you can then ask questions that potentially span that whole body of content. With ChatGPT, that's possible, but it's either, and Anthropic and Gemini as well, but it's either you have to kind of work hard to build the content context yourself, like you need to set up a project, like upload content there, or let's say you're leaning on it to research your past chats. Your mileage will vary. It kind of does like whatever it thinks is best effort at the moment and will try to answer things, but it's not really focused on doing that kind of activity, which is run through a big data set and try to find things that are relevant or important. So in Assembly, you have a big data set. You have a data set of all the meetings that you've attended, as well as potentially meetings that were shared with you. So for example, at Assembly, we have a feature called collections where you can like set up kind of a playlist of all the meetings you had, let's say with a particular customer, and then you can share it with your colleague. So suddenly your colleague has that additional context of information in their library. And so you may have, many, many, many hours of content that you can use to find, correlate, analyze some kind of thing that you need. So here's a good example of interrogating your meeting library set. For example, let's say you're doing, and most organizations need to do this, you're doing your annual performance review. And it's not that the performance review is hard. We kind of have an innate sense of kind of where people fall on the scale. But the hard part is always you need to find objective examples of where a person showed like overachievement, underachievement, or whatever have you. And that's the hard part, because you have to sit there and think like, what was an example of this person demonstrating this thing? And it could have happened half a year ago or something like that. That stuff that can take hours, like just noodling through. So with Assembly, you can give it your performance assessment criteria, and you can ask it to find examples of evidence that will support something or another thing for that criteria, and list those examples for you. So it will run through like a year's worth of content and then find examples and interactions where this person showed like, let's say they were like very active in like solving a particular problem, or like, maybe they presented like an outsized, like overpowered solution that then like was super, super meaningful in your year's performance, whatever it was. Maybe they were like very collaborative with a teammate and like kind of very complimentary. Whatever your criteria are for assessment, Assembly can run through a year's worth of data and find like those instances and say like for example, like on this day, like person X like discussed this problem and offered this solution, and that demonstrates blah, blah, blah. And suddenly this exercise that used to take you hours can take you minutes using Assembly interrogating your year's worth of content.
Yeah. So it's my mental model of what you just said is, the ChatGPT model, or like using any like foundational like tool, it doesn't assume that there is a body of work. Like you have to collect the evidence. And so what Assembly is doing is it is designed to collect evidence from meetings and catalog it for you to reference later. And that just sounds like you're automating like your meeting like RAG for the guest, retrieval augmented generation, where you're constraining the source material that the AI is like looking at. What did you learn in the process of AI getting good, right? You started in 2019. It was a lot of machine learning, data science to create like this, I would say like competitive moat to this tool. And then the cost to run like inference on meeting transcripts and all that stuff starts to go down. What was like the hard questions you had to ask yourselves to reevaluate your company? You mentioned that you guys had to step back as this company got better. Like what changed? What was the hard questions you had to ask to reposition the company?
With the introduction of modern LLMs, what it did was it kind of raised the base watermark for what's easy or what's very achievable to do in technology. So pre-LLM, the kinds of features we had on our platform, basically no one had and would be very challenged to put together. There was really a lot of hard innovation baked in. With LLMs coming to the fore, suddenly you can create a basic version of what we're doing fairly easily. And so there was a proliferation of these kind of a la note-taking apps of all different kinds of flavors. Now, of course, like there's all kinds of things that they have. Like maybe they don't support like privacy. Maybe they're not SOC 2 Type 2 compliant. Maybe they store things in the geography you're not supposed to store. Maybe like they're not so accurate. Maybe they can handle if you switch languages mid-track. Maybe they don't understand in a clear way, like who was speaking. There's all these weirdnesses, right? And the kind of less mature applications were doing that, but suddenly note taking in and of itself was not a big challenge. And so we had to step back and say, okay, note taking was the low hanging fruit for post meeting value. What would be kind of the next leap? And we thought that giving AI the ability to work with your entire meeting set will create a lot of power. And that's basically the direction we went into and continue to go into. So today I did something where, we are a SOC 2 Type 2 compliant organization. And so our auditor was in the call with us, and I said, check it out. I'll show you something funny. And I basically took all of our kind of auditor sessions that we also had on Assembly, because Assembly attends all of our auditor sessions. And then based on all of our auditor sessions, I asked Assembly to compile the SOC 2 Type 2 report, like what our auditor takes like 2-3 weeks to do by hand. I just asked Assembly to do it based on those sessions, and it did it like in a few minutes. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, so I think, that was kind of the big question. Now that, meeting notes on its own and task recognition on its own is no longer a hard problem to solve, and there's a lot of competitors in that space, where are we finding value? And we decided we will move towards more organizations that are more oriented to professional services. So that today constitutes a big percentage of our customer base. And also start to focus on the value we can generate in the sales lifecycle and then the delivery lifecycle. So today it's very democratic, meaning that, we don't like specifically say like we do a proposal or a pitch deck or whatever. You kind of decide on your own, and you talk to Assembly about it. We have a feature in the product that's called Insights, where it understands who you are and who the people in the meeting is. And it could be kind of like a coach suggesting that, okay, so like a customer mentioned a competing product, like I suggest you make a side-by-side comparison between your product and that one. So we have that, but it's very kind of a passive feature. And so that's kind of the mode in which Assembly exists today. I think as we go forward, we're going to be getting closer and closer to that last mile where the kind of artifact that you would be comfortable sharing with a client, and I mean like beautiful, like media rich, on brand, all of that, that will be the product coming out of a work product that directly comes out of Assembly. And so the amount of work you'll need to do is going to get less and less when it comes to these more advanced work products that you're producing for your clients. So today it's like mostly text. If you're like to produce something beautiful as a deck, you need to take that and you need to give it to a designer. But as we move forward, I think we're going to start to bridge that gap as well.
Okay. So that is interesting. Like what you said about when the Moat isn't meeting notes, because the cost to like make a meeting note app has gone down. And then one of the things that you did was reconsider your positioning, which I think is like a very like shrewd thing to do. Usually most product people or like business folks will like zero in on product. Like, okay, how can we like build the technical moat? And I think like more and more the technical moat is, like you said, from a watermark perspective, is getting higher and higher to a point where it's like creating a more technical product might not be enough to differentiate your product. And so instead of focusing on, like, you focused your market, you're like, okay, professional services, we're going to focus on that. How did that influence your product design, like your onboarding process, like your messaging, when you made that decision? Okay, we're just going to focus on, we're not going to make tech things for tech people, right? We're going to focus on the specific segment. Like, what was the kind of like the tactical things that you guys did to position yourselves that way? And like maybe how did it impact the product design as well?
So that transition is still ongoing. We're midway in realizing that strategy change, because once you reach a certain level of momentum as a company, you can't just pivot on a dime. So it's great to have momentum, but unfortunately that also means we need to do well by our existing customers and make sure that we're continuing to provide value. One was to make sure that we continue to provide a best-in-class meeting notes and related, I don't want to say meeting notes, I'll say meeting intelligence experience to our existing customers. And so that part of it isn't going away. We're going to continue to maintain a meeting intelligence product. But we started working on another, you can say, invocation of our product that has certain core principles of professional service organizations baked in. For example, one thing that distinguishes a professional service organization is they all have clients, and those clients have projects, and have an understanding that that setup and hierarchy for a professional services company allows you to do a lot more on a per client and a per project basis. And so we can start to wrap features around what such an organization can provide or generate for its client or within the project itself. So creating that bringing that construct into our product was an important step. The other thing was we're starting to be a lot more pointed in the kinds of artifacts that we aim to generate. So whereas when we started, it was open-ended, it was very like ChatGPT-like, where you can just go in and ask for anything you want. We're starting to create very agentic-centered experiences where the agents are very specialized in creating certain kinds of materials and output. And for example, like a case study. So imagine being able to on demand generate case studies that are specific to a particular client situation. So you're a professional service organization, you're selling marketing, or you're selling technical services, or maybe selling HR services, whatever it is. You have clients, and then the client comes to you and says, okay, we're considering you as a vendor. We're also considering these other vendors. How cool would it be if you had some discovery calls with that potential client, and then you can generate a case study that showcases that you've done something similar to what the client is asking for another customer and highlight the success you've had there? That's something that most agencies can't afford to do. That's a long and difficult process. Only the biggest agencies can really invest in doing something like that. But with Sembly, you can literally just say, okay, I need a case study for this client. And the agent that specializes in creating case studies will be able to do the relevant research and pull together materials, understand the branding guidelines and all that stuff, and create the case study for you. So that's the direction that we're going into. I think that the important thing is what I started with, which is that it wasn't like we're going to drop what we did and we're going to do something new. We're really building on top of what we've done already, and we're keeping our customer base intact. And for those customers who want something beyond pure meeting intelligence and they want additional levels of productivity from their Sembly investment, we're going to have these additional offerings for them in a more specialized experience that will understand clients, understand projects.
I love that. And I'm just going to keep pushing the metaphor of a rising watermark, right? It's just because the tide has risen, right? You still have to keep your head above water. Ideally, it's like you're doing it through a boat, right? And hopefully the boat's like rising with the tide, right? And I'd imagine like when this new disruptive technology came up, it started creating some leaks in the boat. And we're like, oh, shoot, we have to, one, fix the direction of the boat. And two, we have to fix X and X leak. And then now, how do we build and improve the boat in the first place? Like, how do we build on top of the boat now that like this technology is like freeing up a lot of like capabilities? And so what I'm hearing is the differentiator now isn't just doing like the small scope task of taking meeting notes, which for a long time, I know a lot of people, they built their whole career on being like the best note taker, like summarizer person. And they get promoted for it because they're really good at getting intelligence to like the VP of product, right? And now those people have been disrupted because anyone could get that level of output using meeting note apps today. Now, what the next thing is, hey, the meeting note never was the end all be. What makes like management consulting such a strong like service model is it's taking that data and performing like the real like synthesis work of taking that like data, turning it into models and client briefs to help get to the insight. And there's like multiple artifacts from meeting notes to raw data pools between that and really good client brief. And it's like the agent orchestration layer is a differentiator. I'll talk about other companies, so we're not like just talking about your company and like all of your product strategy on the episode, but it's like, why do I use Perplexity over Claude? And for me, it's Claude, I love the product, but Perplexity gives me the optionality to switch between models within one subscription to get like similar outputs that I would have gotten in Claude because it's the same model. And Perplexity's, what I'm paying Perplexity for is the orchestration layer. Of it will switch models automatically, depending on what the task is. And I could have the control to choose what gets put into it. There's a cost to that flexibility. It requires a more advanced user to be able to really take advantage of it, but it gives me the optionality while maintaining like my costs of all the AI subscriptions I have. Like Warp Terminal is like Claude Code, but with every model. It's like it's a terminal app, agentic a terminal app. I could just use terminal with Claude Code, but there might be tasks that like are overkill for how expensive Claude tokens are. And I'd rather vibe code with a platform that like changes to cheaper models for like smaller tasks to get like a better agentic experience. Like I don't have to be like a pro user. Like it automatically creates the skill files. It automatically understands my intent and like trains itself without me having to train Claude Code to do all this orchestration and like iterative learning. And that's why I pay for like a software company that's built on top of these frontier models because their orchestration layer is way better. And to me, that's really where the edge is. Okay, who do you focus on? Like your positioning, who are you selling to? You mentioned like the watermark rose, and just because the watermark rose doesn't mean you abandon meeting notes. Or like, no, now that's the new watermark. Like we have to have a on par meeting note feature, but that's not going to be enough to like be competitive. Now we got to be like, okay, what's the next artifact after meeting notes? Oh, it's the frameworks applied to synthesize those meeting notes. It's and so you orchestrate that for the customer, and then you build on top of that. Like having like insights isn't enough. Like you need that final artifact for the client to summarize everything into what the eventual insight is so that they could change their behavior. So I just think that's super interesting.
Yeah. I think as we go forward, so one, like something you mentioned was like, how do we go from old models into like more legacy models into LLMs into other things? I think the world is evolving quickly. The technology world is evolving quickly. We have to evolve with it. And I think there's a lot of doom and gloom around software companies in general that they're all going to be like phased out by just advanced models from the core model providers. I'm not so sure, but certainly there's going to be some of that. But I think generally where we see software going is more complete, more agentic use cases. So that just what this means is that historically, like classic software was about features. It was about like modeling your data effectively and creating a system of record that was specific for certain data models like CRMs for sales or ATSs for HR. And then there's features on top of that. But we really are shifting into a new paradigm with software, which is it's not about your data model and features around that data model. It's actually around your business goals and then the experience of achieving those business goals. And importantly, and maybe the most importantly, the quality of the end result that you get towards that business goal. I've had a lot of conversations about an interesting topic recently, which is, and it's a question I get all the time as well now, which is, okay, let's say you built like this case study generator from Assembly, but can't they go into like Copilot or Claude and ask it to generate a case study for me and I'll just upload it some documents? And I think this is super interesting because there's like a completeness factor to the output these products produce. And Copilot and Claude will, let's say you're an analyst or an associate who's typically tasked with building an artifact like this by hand. And now you have the wherewithal of Copilot and Claude. Okay, does that mean like you just press a button and you're done? Absolutely not. If you're using Copilot and Claude, it will help you, but it will take you like 15 to 20% of the way. And you're going to need to spend another 80% on making that presentation real, usable, client shareable. Like it's way far from client shareable. The general platforms, including Copilot, they have a last mile problem, which is they can only get you so far, but there's specialized kind of logic and mechanisms you need to get it to like a client presentable level. And I don't think these core model products will get the last mile. I think that's for example, Gemma or Gamma, I don't know how you pronounce it, is doing a
Gamma.
part of that. Yeah. So I think, and that's funny, right? Because if you go into enterprise today and you say, I have this thing that's going to just explode your brain because on demand, you can have customer specific case studies generated. They'll say, oh, what do you mean? Copilot does that. And today, there's not an awareness in the IT space of how to think about that, because it sounds like you're just checking off the same check mark with Copilot whereas that's not true. And the reason that's not true is because we're so used to going down the checklist of features. Like, does it have this feature? Does it have that feature? But it's no longer about features. It's about achieving goals or achieving certain kinds of experiences. And those things have more qualified metrics than just yes or no.
Yeah.
I'm working with bigger concepts here, but I hope it's making sense. Whereas if I'm making a case study, if I just made some like, bare bones text slides that essentially convey what I want to convey in a case study, but like you would never share that with a major customer. Like you would need to like bring in your design team, bring your associate. You need to massage that into something that's really presentable. And you're still spending like 80% plus of the time you would have spent, even though you have Copilot on hand.
Yeah.
That's not like the same checkbox as you're getting like a beautiful, well-designed, well-branded, like complete factual referenced case study on hand. Like those are two different worlds, but is it a case study? Check on both sides. So I think we're going to need to catch up to that space where it's not enough just to say, oh, I can do it with this. It's also about some metric of completeness as compared with what your team can do without these tools.
I am picking up what you're putting down. To any of those folks that think, oh, I can just use Claude. Okay, maybe assembly is not for you, but I think for highly technical people that like are spending their free time learning about AI, yeah, you could technically make your own soloware for your use cases. But at the end of the day, that's not really scalable. You need, like, also being in tech, and you probably see this too. I consider myself a very advanced AI user. And the difference between like me and like most of my peers that I work with, like the delta is so huge on what outputs they can get. I'm a trained designer, new front end frameworks and like how to code front end before AI was cool. And I didn't really have a lot of hobbies outside of that, outside of like work, because I was trying to get an edge in work to build my taste broader. And that gave me an edge with AI because I can make like very awesome coded, I would say like more like AI assisted prototyping is probably like a more accurate term. I make my own soloware for this podcast, but but it's okay, cool. Like the SaaS market's lost one $20 subscription, right? But most people, it's like the tech world is not that advanced. Like people are still trying to get their hands around it because they've never learned to delegate before. Mark Andreessen talks about how it isn't job automation, it's task automation, right? And tasks always get automated. and like jobs like change as like technologies make things easier. In your background in management consulting, would you say that there's like partners at management consulting firms that are bad at delegating work to associates? And what's the difference between them and like a management consultant that's good at delegating work?
I don't think there's a single partner that I've met that's bad at delegating, because once you're a partner, that you're only delegating. You're actually
Okay.
not doing any of the work. And that's
Okay.
part of, I think, what helps you to rise through the ranks in management consulting is effective delegation. But I wouldn't say it like delegation, I guess, is one way of talking about it. I think it's more about just pure communication. And that's like a fluffy word. So I'll be more specific about what I mean. It's
Yeah.
about to relate to someone else in a very sharp way, the idea that you have, so that person has the exact same idea. And so this is where the metal is tested, because first of all, it has to be sharp in your mind first. And I think that's a lot. Sometimes that's where things fall apart. If you don't really know what you're trying to do, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to get someone to like figure out the thing that you haven't figured out yet that you want done, right? So you have to have a very sharp idea of what you want to accomplish. That's step one. And that's hard to do in the first place. But then
Yeah.
step two is communicating that effectively to someone else so that they can get a twin representation of that idea in their mind, and then they can put it further to work. I think that's what distinguishes like a good communicator, a good delegator. And people who can do that well can also do that well with LLMs and AI. Because if you can very clearly explain to someone like what it is that you're trying to accomplish, you can also do that with AI, and then AI will do a much better job. And that includes things like providing the right kinds of context, bringing in context that would be important to understand in the given situation, like providing counters. Like this is, we don't want it like that. We want it more like this. And the end audience is like that. And it should have these performance characteristics and criteria. There's a lot to it, but ultimately you have to convey that idea in all of its dimensions to that other mind. But that other mind could be human, but today it could also be AI.
Yeah. New wrinkle in my brain. Fantastic answer, by the way. It's if you're a partner, like you got there for a reason, right? Like partnership is like a sense of trust, like equity. Usually it means like you probably have equity in the business, and it isn't delegating. It's more like directing, right? Like it's directing work because it never was your job to make the slide deck. It never was your job to do the analysis, right? Like you have a team, like that's already someone else's job, and they have their set of tasks, but your job is to clearly articulate and communicate the intent, like the commander's intent, to use military sense. So it's nothing it ever was about delegating, right? I think that like you still own the process, but like you didn't hire that junior analyst because they're optional, right? Like it's their responsibility to provide a thorough analysis and provide like to your standards, and you need to communicate those standards to that analyst. I think that's a really nice reframe, right? It's like most people don't know what they want because people haven't had the time to actually do the hard mental work of planning and thinking about like where do they fit in the market. If that was true, if that's not true, then why is there such a big multi-billion-dollar consulting industry? Like, what do you hire consultants for? It's because you don't have time to plan, right? I think that's like a fantastic reframe.
Thank you. I think it's true. And it's also, when you're doing this, the way you communicate something will change depending on who you're communicating it to. So even understanding how much context the AI has access to at a given moment will change how you describe to the AI what it is that you need it to do. So it's a pretty complex equation you're solving when you're directing, as you said. And I think good skills in that area can get you outsized results.
Yeah. And so it's not about the artifacts anymore. Like we don't want tools. We want agents that like help magnify our work. And one insight I had from like a couple episodes ago with the CTO is I'm like, oh, agents have always existed. There's always been human agents, lawyers. There's always been executive assistants, virtual assistants. Like before AI got good, there was a point where I was vetting virtual assistants for this podcast. And then I'm like, the cost to maintain this relationship with this person on the other side of the world, it's just, I don't think it's like worth the squeeze for what I'm trying to do with the show. And so it hampered growth. There was still like a cost to it, like a strong economic cost, even if it was relatively cheap to hire a VA. Now the cost of agents has dropped significantly. It's like people keep talking about the cost of software. It's not the cost of being able to sell an agentic service where people can delegate the mundane admin work has gone down. And that's what people are going to want to pay for soon. It's not about, did it create a deck like a checkbox, right? Like its features. Is it doing what was sold in the feature list on the landing page? It's, hey, is that deck more or less leading to better client outcomes? Because what's the success of a service firm? Is the client winning because they engage with you? Like now it's more about the scoreboard, right? Like you can't hide behind like corporate fluff and lingo.
Yeah, absolutely. It becomes alignment with your goals, and technology becomes more and more of a partner in helping you to attain those goals quickly, efficiently, at the best quality that's possible. We're not there yet. There's only a few products that are aspiring in that direction. But as we go on over these next couple of years, 2, 3 years, you're going to see more and more of these kinds of solutions that are not feature solutions. They are goal attaining solutions for different departments or for your organization as a whole. And I think that's where the magic is.
Artem, do you feel like there's anything that hasn't been said that should be said while we're still on the record?
Everyone who's listening should definitely check out Sembly, SEMBLY.ai online, and try the product for yourself. If you haven't yet, it will change your life. You won't know how you've lived without it until now. It's something that myself and our team, we use it every day for our own needs. And it's really now anxiety inducing if I don't have Sembly on a call with me, because I know I'm going to need to do something that may require something from this call. And now that if I don't have it in Sembly, it's trouble. So certainly check it out. There's a free trial with every plan. And I think it's going to really level up your work, especially once you get more advanced and you start connecting Sembly to some of these apps that you're using, like CRMs. We're also coming out exclusive for you guys. We're soon coming out with an MCP interface to Sembly. And so if you're like an AI geek and you like to write like cool things, maybe you have like OpenClaw that you're working with, you'll very soon be able to interface that with Sembly. And so a very basic use case is, let's say you're like a Cursor AI developer. You can go on Cursor and you can say that bug fix that we discussed on our call with Max or whatever, take the details of that bug fix and fix the bug that we discussed in my code. And Cursor will be able to like pull the information from the meeting, synthesize like everything that needed to be done, and then proceed to fixing the bug. You literally don't even have to describe it because it was already discussed. So things like that, but there's many more use cases that come out of this.
Yeah. Do you feel like having a strong data graph architecture and a good MCP interface is probably like the new advanced user experience?
I wouldn't blanket everything. It still depends on what it is that your product is. But in many cases, I'd say absolutely, because we're entering a world where your application becomes much more useful if other applications can interact with it agentically. And that's, if you think about what I just said, that's crazy, but it's really cool.
Yeah, like your different agent vendors that are not even in the same company are talking to each other and reading the API documentation. I think that's super cool because I think like the scariest thing about the old age of software, like the worst thing, you see it with the Workdays and the Salesforce is right, is vendor lock, like contract lock, where like they have literally every solution that you could want in a certain domain. But because they went so broad and because software is still expensive and slow to develop when they were expanding and doing these acquisitions, you're getting just a lot of like subpar solutions. And it's, oh, what if I could get like the best, like in podcasting, right? I get the best video editing AI agent and I get the best calendar agent, right? Instead of having a whole horizontal SaaS, like I could just get the best of any vertical and they'll talk to each other without needing like a Zapier or anything like that. That's pretty cool. Artem. Also, anyone, like, please reach out to him on LinkedIn. His name is spelled RTEM, and then it's, how do you say your last name? It's Koren. Koren.
Yeah, Koren. So Artem, Artem. The last name is Koren, Koren. I believe on LinkedIn I'm in/A Koren, so AKOREN. So you can always reach me that way.
Artem, thank you so much for coming on the show. You have a good one.
Thank you.
Hey listener, thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.